Standing at the edge of the camp, Margaret held her newborn twins tightly against the bitter cold that seeped through her thin coat. Her fellow settlers were busy preparing for their journey, oblivious to her plight. No more supplies. No one to help. Just the biting wind and endless snow. She stood alone, feeling the weight of her loss and fear. But as the group moved on without her, a Lakota warrior appeared, calm, strong, and observing her closely. She thought she was about to face her end. But destiny had different plans. Before we begin, share where you're watching from and subscribe if you believe that unexpected encounters can change lives. Margaret stood at the edge of the camp, holding her newborn twins close to her chest. The cold wind cut through her thin coat, biting into her skin. She looked around at the other settlers, busy preparing for their journey westward. They were a group of people seeking a better life, just like her. But the journey was hard and the conditions were harsh. The snowstorm made everything more difficult. She thought about her husband, who had died a few months ago. They had dreamed of a new start together, but now she was alone with the twins. Margaret felt the weight of her responsibility. She had to keep them safe and warm. But the supplies were running low and the cold was relentless. As she watched the others pack their belongings, her heart sank. She knew she was slowing them down. The group leader walked over to her, his face serious. He explained that they needed to move quickly to reach their destination before the next storm hit. Margaret nodded, understanding the urgency. But she also knew that traveling with 2 infants was slowing the group down. The leader hesitated before speaking again, his voice gentle but firm. They could not afford the delay. They had to leave her behind. Tears filled Margaret's eyes as she looked at the faces of the people she had traveled with for weeks. She had hoped for their support, but the reality was clear. They had to think of the group as a whole. She nodded in acceptance, though her heart ached with fear and loneliness. The leader placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a small bag of food and an apologetic look. As the settlers gathered their things and prepared to leave, Margaret felt a mix of emotions. She was scared and overwhelmed, but she also felt a flicker of determination. She had to survive not just for herself but for her children. She watched as the group set off, their figures disappearing into the swirling snow. Margaret was left standing there, holding her twins close, trying to shield them from the biting cold. The wind howled around her, and the snow stung her face. She needed to find shelter and save her strength. She remembered the small grove of trees not far from where they camped. It was not much, but it could offer some protection from the wind. Gathering her courage, she started toward the trees, each step heavy with the weight of her children and her fear. The twins began to stir and fuss, their small cries barely audible over the wind. Margaret shushed them softly, her heart aching with worry. She had to keep them warm and safe. She wrapped them tighter in their blankets, her breath visible in the freezing air. Her feet moved slowly through the deep snow, each step a struggle. Her mind raced with thoughts of survival. She needed to focus on what she could do, not on what she had lost. When she reached the grove, Margaret found a spot where the trees were thickest. The branches above provided some cover from the falling snow. She cleared a small area and spread out the thin blanket she had. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. She settled down, pulling her coat around the twins to keep them warm. The cold seeped through her clothes, but she ignored it. The safety of her children was all that mattered. Margaret reached into the bag of supplies the leader had given her. There was a small loaf of bread, a few strips of dried meat, and a flask of water. She rationed them carefully, knowing they had to last. She took a small sip of water and a bite of bread, mindful of preserving as much as possible. As she ate, she thought of her husband and the dreams they had shared. A life full of hope and promise, now reduced to survival in the snow. The twins slept fitfully, their small bodies nestled against her. Margaret watched them, her heart full of love and fear. She had to be strong for them. She had to find a way to survive. As the day turned to night, the temperature dropped further. She huddled closer to the twins, using her body heat to keep them warm. The darkness was thick and the howling wind was her only companion. Margaret's mind wandered to memories of her husband, his laughter, and the warmth of his smile. She had lost so much, but she still had her children. The thought gave her strength. She could not let despair take over. She had to keep moving forward, one step at a time. As she lay there, the snow piling up around them, she felt a flicker of hope. She would find a way to keep her family safe. She had to. The night was long and cold, but Margaret held on. The twins stirred occasionally, their small cries breaking the silence. She comforted them as best as she could, whispering words of love and promises of safety. Her own exhaustion was overwhelming, but she did not give in. She had to be alert, ready to face whatever came next. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Margaret looked around the snow-covered grove. The storm had eased, but the cold remained. She knew she needed to find better shelter and more food. Her mind was clear on the task ahead. She had to keep moving, keep fighting. For her twins, for her husband's memory, and for herself. Margaret gathered her strength and prepared to leave the grove. She wrapped the twins tightly, securing them to her chest. Her legs were weak and her body ached from the cold, but determination drove her forward. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the day ahead. She would not give up. She would find a way to survive. With each step, Margaret focused on the future. A future where she and her children could find safety and peace. She pushed through the snow, her resolve unwavering. She was alone, but she was not defeated. The journey was far from over, and she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Margaret trudged through the snow, her steps slow and deliberate. The twins were wrapped tightly against her chest, their small bodies warm under layers of blankets. She watched her breath turn to mist in the cold air. Her mind raced with thoughts of finding shelter. She needed to act fast before the storm returned. She scanned the landscape, searching for anything that might offer protection. Her eyes caught a rocky outcrop in the distance. It was not much, but it could shield them from the wind. She adjusted the twins, making sure they were secure, and continued toward the rocks. Her heart pounded with the effort, but she focused on her goal. When she reached the outcrop, Margaret found a small hollow at its base. It was just large enough for her and the twins. She cleared away some snow and settled down, tucking the twins inside her coat. The rocks blocked the wind and the small space began to warm slightly from her body heat. It was not perfect, but it was better than nothing. Margaret took stock of her supplies. The bread and meat were nearly gone and the water was low. She had to be careful with what she had left. She took a small piece of bread and chewed slowly, savoring every bite. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. The twins needed her strength. The storm clouds gathered again and snow began to fall. Margaret huddled deeper into the hollow, her mind focused on survival. She used the edge of her coat to catch snowflakes, letting them melt into drops of water. It was a small trickle, but it was something. She was resourceful, using what she had to keep going. The cold pressed in, testing her resilience. Her hands were numb and her legs ached from the long walk. She rubbed her fingers to keep the blood flowing, careful not to jostle the sleeping twins. Her body was tired, but her spirit was strong. She had to protect her children no matter what. As the snow fell, Margaret thought about her husband. She remembered his strength and how he always knew what to do. She missed him deeply, but she also felt his presence guiding her. They had dreamed of a new life together, and she was determined to make that dream a reality for their children. Her heart ached with loss, but she found comfort in her memories. Night fell, and the world turned silent under the blanket of snow. Margaret kept watch, her eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of danger. Her mind was sharp, focused on the task of survival. She had to be ready for anything. The twins slept soundly, their breaths soft and even. She touched their cheeks, feeling their warmth against her cold fingers. They were her reason to keep fighting. The storm raged on, but Margaret refused to give in to despair. She thought about the future, imagining a place where her children could grow up safe and happy. She pictured a home filled with laughter and love. These thoughts gave her strength, pushing her forward through the long night. As dawn broke, the storm began to ease. Margaret emerged from the hollow, blinking in the pale morning light. The world was quiet and still, covered in a thick layer of snow. She knew she had to move to find better shelter and more food. Her body was tired, but her will was strong. She adjusted the twins, making sure they were secure, and set off once more. Her steps were steady and determined, each one bringing her closer to her goal. She had to find a way to survive. She had to keep her family safe. Margaret thought about the settlers who had left her behind. She felt a pang of loneliness, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. She could do this on her own. She had to. Her children depended on her, and she would not let them down. As she walked, Margaret kept an eye out for anything that might help. She searched for signs of life, hoping to find a small animal or a patch of edible plants. Her eyes scanned the landscape, looking for movement or color against the white snow. She knew she had to be resourceful, using whatever she could find to keep them alive. The day wore on, and Margaret's strength began to wane. The cold seeped into her bones, and her legs felt heavy. But she kept moving, driven by the love she had for her children. Her mind was clear, focused on the task at hand. She would not give up. As the sun began to set, Margaret stumbled upon a small stream. The water was partially frozen, but it was a welcome sight. She knelt down, breaking the thin layer of ice with her fingers. She scooped up some water, letting it trickle into her mouth. It was cold and refreshing, giving her a much-needed boost of energy. Margaret filled her flask, careful not to waste a drop. The stream was a small victory, a reminder that she could find what she needed if she kept looking. She felt a renewed sense of hope, a belief that she could make it through this. With the water secured, Margaret set her sights on finding food. Her eyes scanned the trees for signs of wildlife. She knew it was a long shot, but she had to try. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it, focusing instead on the task at hand. As the light began to fade, Margaret found a small patch of berries growing under a bush. They were not much, but they were something. She picked them carefully, mindful of saving some for later. She popped a few into her mouth, feeling the burst of sweetness on her tongue. It was a small comfort, a reminder that she could find a way to survive. Margaret settled down for the night, her body weary but her spirit strong. She wrapped the twins tightly, keeping them close to her chest. Her mind was filled with thoughts of the future, of the life she wanted for her children. She knew she had a long way to go, but she was ready for the journey. As she drifted off to sleep, Margaret felt a sense of peace. She had faced the storm and survived. She had found water and food. She had kept her children safe. She knew there were more challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. She was a mother, and she would do whatever it took to protect her family. The morning sun peeked through the clouds, casting a soft glow over the snowy landscape. Margaret awoke to the sound of rustling branches. Her body was stiff and cold, but she pushed herself up, alert to her surroundings. The twins were still asleep, their small bodies warm against her chest. She looked around, her senses on high alert. In the distance, a lone figure moved steadily through the snow. Margaret's heart skipped a beat. Fear gripped her as she considered the possibilities. Was it a traveler? A threat? She tightened her hold on the twins, ready to protect them at all costs. The figure came closer, and Margaret saw that it was a man. He wore clothing that looked foreign to her, with patterns and colors she did not recognize. He moved with purpose, his steps sure and confident. Margaret's heart raced as she watched him approach. She knew she had to be cautious, but she also knew she could not run. Her legs were too tired, and the snow was too deep. The man stopped a few paces away, his eyes meeting hers. There was a calmness in his gaze, a sense of strength and assurance. Margaret felt a flicker of hope, though she was still wary. She had to trust her instincts to make the right choice for her children. The man, a Lakota warrior named Chayton, had been traveling through the area. The storm had delayed him, but he was used to the harsh conditions. He was seeking shelter, much like Margaret. As he moved through the snow, he noticed something unusual, a small hollow at the base of a rocky outcrop. Curiosity drew him closer, and that was when he saw Margaret and her twins. Chayton's heart went out to the woman huddled in the snow. He could see her fear and exhaustion. He knew he could not leave her there. His own values and compassion urged him to help. He understood the struggle for survival, and he admired her courage. Margaret watched as Chayton knelt down, his movements slow and deliberate. He extended his hand toward her, offering help without words. The gesture was simple, but it spoke volumes. Margaret hesitated, her mind racing with doubts. But she knew she had no choice. She had to trust him, at least for now. She nodded slowly, signaling her acceptance. Chayton moved closer, careful not to startle her. He spoke in a low, soothing voice, though she did not understand his words. His tone was kind, and his eyes were steady. Margaret felt a small measure of comfort in his presence. Chayton assessed the situation quickly. He saw the thin blankets and the near-empty flask. He understood the urgency. He gestured for Margaret to follow him, indicating that he knew of a safer place. Margaret hesitated again, but something in Chayton's demeanor reassured her. She gathered her strength and stood, holding the twins securely. Together, they made their way through the snow. Chayton led the way, his steps confident and sure. Margaret followed, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. She did not know this man, but she felt an inexplicable trust in him. She had to believe that he could help them. The journey was slow, but Chayton's presence gave Margaret the courage to keep moving. He guided her to a small, sheltered area surrounded by trees. The space was protected from the wind and the ground was dry. Chayton gestured for Margaret to sit, sensing her exhaustion. Margaret sank to the ground, her legs weary from the walk. She held the twins close, grateful for the brief respite. Chayton moved with purpose, gathering wood and kindling. He worked quickly, starting a small fire that crackled and glowed. The warmth was a welcome relief, and Margaret felt some of the tension leave her body. Chayton reached into his pack and pulled out some dried meat and berries. He offered them to Margaret, his expression encouraging. She accepted, her hunger overriding her hesitation. The food was simple but nourishing, and she savored each bite. The twins stirred, and she offered them a few of the berries. Their small faces lit up with delight, and Margaret felt a surge of hope. Margaret and Chayton sat in silence, the fire casting flickering shadows. The language barrier was a challenge, but they found ways to communicate. Gestures and expressions bridged the gap, allowing them to understand one another. Margaret was grateful for Chayton's presence, for the safety he offered. As the day wore on, the tension between them eased. Margaret felt a growing sense of trust in Chayton. His quiet strength was reassuring, and his actions showed his good intentions. She knew she had made the right choice in accepting his help. Chayton, too, felt a connection with Margaret. He admired her resilience and her fierce determination to protect her children. He sensed her vulnerability, but he also saw her strength. He was determined to help her, to ensure she and her twins were safe. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the snow-covered landscape. Margaret and Chayton prepared to settle in for the night. The fire crackled softly, its warmth a comfort in the cold. Margaret wrapped the twins in their blankets, tucking them close to her side. Chayton lay a short distance away, keeping watch over the small camp. His presence was a comfort, and Margaret felt a sense of peace she had not known in days. She knew there were challenges ahead, but she also knew she was not alone. With Chayton's help, she had a chance. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Margaret closed her eyes. Her mind was still, her heart full of gratitude. She had faced the storm and survived. She had found help in an unexpected place. She knew the journey was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever came next. She had hope, and she had her children. That was enough. Morning light filtered through the trees, casting a gentle glow over the camp. Margaret slowly awoke, feeling the warmth of the fire and the weight of her twins nestled against her. The previous day's fear and uncertainty were still fresh in her mind, yet she also felt a growing sense of safety. Chayton had proven to be a steadfast ally, and his presence eased her worries. Margaret glanced over at Chayton, who was already awake and tending to the fire. His movements were quiet and efficient, a testament to his skills and experience. She felt a surge of gratitude for his help and the shelter he had provided. Without him, she might not have survived the night. As the twins stirred, Margaret gently rocked them back to sleep. Her heart swelled with love and determination. She had to keep them safe, to find a way forward. Her mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. She knew she had to trust Chayton, despite the language barrier and cultural differences. Chayton approached, offering a small piece of dried meat and some berries. Margaret accepted, grateful for the food. She smiled, a silent thank you in her eyes. Chayton nodded, understanding her gratitude. They ate in silence, the fire crackling softly between them. Margaret wanted to communicate her intentions, to let Chayton know she was ready to continue their journey together. She gestured toward the path ahead, then pointed to herself and the twins. Chayton watched her closely, his expression thoughtful. He understood her meaning and nodded in agreement. Despite the language barrier, a bridge of trust was forming between them. Chayton gestured toward the forest, indicating their next move. Margaret's heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. She knew she had to trust him, to rely on his knowledge of the land. As they prepared to leave, Margaret secured the twins in their blankets, ensuring they were warm and comfortable. Chayton helped her gather their few belongings, his actions purposeful and reassuring. Together, they set off into the forest, leaving the small camp behind. The journey was slow but steady. Chayton led the way, his steps confident and sure. Margaret followed closely, her eyes scanning the landscape for any signs of danger. She was alert, ready to protect her children if needed. But with Chayton by her side, she felt a growing sense of safety. As they walked, Margaret marveled at Chayton's skills. He moved through the forest with ease, his eyes sharp and focused. He pointed out edible plants and useful herbs, teaching her as they traveled. Margaret listened intently, eager to learn and grateful for his guidance. The forest was alive with sounds and sights. Birds chirped in the trees, and the wind whispered through the branches. Margaret felt a sense of peace, a momentary escape from the worries that weighed on her. She knew they still had a long way to go, but the journey felt less daunting with Chayton by her side. During a brief rest, Margaret and Chayton sat together, sharing what little food they had. The twins slept peacefully, their small faces relaxed and content. Margaret watched them, her heart full of love and hope. She was determined to give them the life she had dreamed of. Chayton gestured toward the horizon, indicating their destination. Margaret understood that he was leading them to safety, to a place where they could find shelter and support. She felt a surge of hope, a belief that they could make it together. As they continued their journey, the bond between Margaret and Chayton grew stronger. They communicated through gestures and expressions, finding ways to bridge the gap between their worlds. Margaret felt a deepening trust in Chayton, a belief in his ability to guide them safely. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the forest. Margaret and Chayton set up camp for the night, working together in silent harmony. They gathered wood for a fire and arranged their belongings, creating a small, cozy space for the night. Margaret felt a sense of accomplishment as she settled down with the twins. She had faced her fears and taken a step forward. She had found an ally in Chayton, someone she could trust and rely on. Together, they were carving a path toward a brighter future. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Margaret lay back, her mind filled with thoughts of the journey ahead. She knew there would be challenges, but she also knew she was not alone. With Chayton's help, she had a chance to build a new life for her children. Chayton kept watch, his eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of danger. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude for his vigilance, for the protection he offered. She knew she could rest, trusting him to keep them safe. As she drifted off to sleep, Margaret felt a sense of peace. She had come a long way, and she was ready to face whatever came next. With Chayton by her side, she felt strong and capable. She had hope and she had her children. That was enough. Margaret awoke to the gentle sound of birds singing in the trees. The morning air was crisp, and the forest around them was peaceful. She sat up slowly, checking on the twins who were still asleep beside her. Their small faces were calm, and she felt a wave of love and determination. She had to keep them safe and find a secure place for them. Chayton was already awake, tending to the fire and preparing for the day's journey. His presence was steady and reassuring, a constant source of strength. Margaret was grateful for his help and guidance. She knew that traveling with him had given her and the twins a chance to survive. As they shared a simple breakfast, Margaret watched Chayton with growing appreciation. He moved with an ease and confidence that she admired. His skills in the wilderness were impressive, and she was eager to learn from him. She knew that knowledge was power, and she was determined to gain as much as she could. After they finished eating, Chayton gestured for Margaret to follow him. He wanted to show her how to gather food and resources. Margaret felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had always relied on others for these things, but now she had to learn for herself. With Chayton's guidance, she was ready to try. Chayton led her through the forest, pointing out various plants and herbs. He showed her which ones were safe to eat and which ones to avoid. Margaret listened carefully, committing his lessons to memory. She picked berries and gathered leaves, feeling a sense of accomplishment with each successful find. They moved quietly through the trees, Chayton teaching her how to listen to the forest. The rustle of leaves, the calls of birds, everything had a meaning. Margaret was amazed at how much there was to learn. She felt a growing respect for Chayton and his deep understanding of the land. As they walked, Chayton demonstrated how to set simple traps for small animals. Margaret watched closely, eager to master the skill. She knew that being able to provide for her twins was crucial. She practiced setting the traps, her movements unsure at first but growing more confident with Chayton's encouragement. The day passed quickly, filled with moments of learning and discovery. Margaret felt a growing sense of independence as she absorbed the lessons. She was beginning to see the forest not as a threat but as a source of life and sustenance. It was a shift in perspective that gave her hope. Chayton's quiet patience was a constant support. He never rushed her, allowing her to learn at her own pace. Margaret was grateful for his kindness and the generosity with which he shared his knowledge. She felt a bond forming between them, a shared respect that transcended words. As the sun began to set, they returned to their camp. Margaret felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she looked at the food and resources they had gathered. She was learning to survive, to provide for her family. It was a feeling of empowerment that she cherished. The fire crackled warmly as they settled down for the night. Margaret fed the twins, their small hands reaching for the berries she had picked. Watching them eat, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She was doing this for them, and it was worth every moment of struggle. Chayton sat across from her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Margaret met his gaze, grateful for his presence in their lives. She knew she could not have come this far without him. His guidance had been invaluable, and she was thankful for his friendship. As the night deepened, the stars appeared in the clear sky above. Margaret lay back, the twins nestled close. Her body was tired, but her spirit was strong. She had faced challenges and learned new skills. She was ready for whatever came next. Chayton kept watch, his senses attuned to the forest around them. He was ever vigilant, ensuring their safety. Margaret felt secure knowing he was there, a silent guardian watching over them. She knew she could rest, trusting him completely. As sleep claimed her, Margaret's thoughts drifted to dreams of the future. Her journey with Chayton had given her hope and strength. She was no longer the frightened woman left behind in the snow. She was a mother, a provider, and a survivor. She was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. With Chayton by her side, Margaret felt a sense of peace and purpose. She had found a path forward, a chance to build a new life for her children. The future was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. She had learned to trust herself and the bond she shared with Chayton. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. Margaret awoke to the sound of birds greeting the morning. The forest was alive with gentle sounds, and the air was crisp and cool. She sat up, feeling the warmth of the twins beside her. Their small faces were peaceful, and she felt a surge of love and determination. She had to keep them safe and give them a future. Chayton was already busy, checking the traps they had set the day before. Margaret watched him work, his movements sure and skilled. She admired his knowledge of the land and his quiet strength. His presence was a comfort, a reminder that she was not alone in this journey. After a simple breakfast, Chayton joined Margaret by the fire. They sat in comfortable silence, the bond between them growing stronger each day. Despite the language barrier, they had learned to communicate through gestures and expressions. Margaret was grateful for Chayton's patience and understanding. He had become a true friend and ally. As they prepared to continue their journey, Margaret thought about the stories she wanted to share with Chayton. She wanted him to know about her life, her struggles, and her dreams. She knew it would not be easy to communicate everything, but she felt it was important to try. Margaret took a deep breath and began. She pointed to herself and then to the sky, trying to convey the loss of her husband. Her eyes filled with tears as she remembered him, the dreams they had shared. Chayton watched her closely, his expression gentle and understanding. He nodded, acknowledging her story. Encouraged, Margaret continued. She gestured to the twins, then placed her hand over her heart. She wanted Chayton to know how much they meant to her, how they were her reason for fighting. Chayton's eyes softened and he nodded again, understanding the depth of her love. Chayton then began to share his own story. He pointed to himself and then to the forest, explaining his connection to the land. Margaret listened intently, her eyes following his gestures. She could sense the pride and respect he had for his culture and his people. He shared memories of his family and the traditions that shaped his life. Margaret could see the emotion in his eyes, the sense of belonging that defined him. She felt honored that he was sharing this part of himself with her. As they exchanged stories, Margaret felt a deepening connection with Chayton. They had both experienced loss and hardship, but they had also found strength and hope. Their shared experiences brought them closer, creating a bond that transcended words. The twins, oblivious to the exchange, played nearby, their laughter filling the air. Margaret watched them, her heart full of love. They were her future, a reminder of why she had to keep moving forward. She wanted to give them a life full of possibilities and happiness. Chayton watched the twins with a soft smile. He saw them as a symbol of hope, a new beginning for both him and Margaret. Their presence was a reminder of what they were fighting for, a future worth protecting. As the day wore on, Margaret and Chayton continued their journey. They walked side by side, their steps in sync. The forest was a constant presence, guiding them with its natural rhythm. Margaret felt a growing sense of peace, a belief that they were on the right path. During a rest, Chayton showed Margaret how to make a simple shelter. He demonstrated how to use branches and leaves to create a protective cover. Margaret watched closely, eager to learn. She practiced under Chayton's guidance, her movements becoming more confident. With each new skill, Margaret felt more empowered. She was no longer just surviving, she was learning to thrive. Chayton's teachings were a gift, a way for her to build a future for herself and her children. She was grateful for his generosity and support. As they sat by the fire that night, Margaret reflected on the day's events. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the bond she shared with Chayton. He had become a vital part of her journey, a guide and a friend. Together, they were creating a new path, one filled with hope and promise. The stars shone brightly overhead as Margaret lay down to sleep. Her mind was calm, her heart full of peace. She knew there were challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. With Chayton by her side, she felt strong and capable. As she drifted off to sleep, Margaret's thoughts turned to the future. She dreamed of a life where her children could grow up happy and safe. She imagined a place where they could thrive, surrounded by love and support. It was a dream worth fighting for, and she was determined to make it a reality. With Chayton's help, Margaret knew she could overcome any obstacle. Together, they were building a future for her family, a future filled with hope and possibility. She was ready to embrace whatever came next, confident in the strength of their bond and the promise of a new beginning. The morning sun rose, casting a golden light over the forest. Margaret and Chayton awoke to a world that seemed peaceful and safe. The twins giggled as they played, their laughter a comforting sound. Margaret felt a sense of hope as she watched them, grateful for the moments of joy they brought. Chayton was already preparing for the day's journey. He moved with purpose, gathering their supplies and checking their surroundings for any signs of danger. Margaret admired his vigilance. She knew it was essential to stay alert even in moments of calm. As they set off through the forest, Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had learned so much from Chayton, and she was determined to use that knowledge to protect her family. Her steps were steady, her heart full of determination. The forest was a place of beauty and danger. Margaret had come to respect its power and the lessons it taught. She was no longer afraid, but she knew she had to remain cautious. The journey was far from over, and she had to be ready for whatever lay ahead. As the group continued, the forest began to change. The dense trees gave way to open spaces, and the path became rocky and uneven. Margaret noticed Chayton's expression grow more serious, his eyes scanning the landscape with increased focus. Margaret's heart quickened as she followed his gaze. She knew something was amiss, but she trusted Chayton to guide them safely. She tightened her hold on the twins, ready to protect them at all costs. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the bushes ahead. Margaret's breath caught in her throat as she watched a group of men emerge from the trees. They were rough-looking, their eyes scanning the group with suspicion. Margaret's instincts screamed danger, and she felt her heart race with fear. Chayton stepped forward, his stance protective. He spoke in a calm but firm voice, his words directed at the strangers. Margaret did not understand the language, but she sensed the tension in the air. She knew she had to stay calm for the twins' sake. The men looked at Chayton, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. They seemed to consider his words, their eyes flicking between him and Margaret. She held her breath, praying for a peaceful resolution. Chayton's presence was steady and confident. Margaret admired his courage, his willingness to stand his ground. She felt a surge of gratitude for his protective instincts, a belief that he would keep them safe. The standoff seemed to last forever, but finally the men nodded and stepped back. Chayton's calm demeanor had diffused the situation, and Margaret felt a wave of relief. She watched as the men disappeared into the forest, grateful for their departure. Once the danger had passed, Margaret let out a shaky breath. Her heart was still pounding, but she felt a deep sense of gratitude for Chayton's quick thinking. He had protected them, and she was thankful for his unwavering support. Chayton turned to Margaret, his expression gentle and reassuring. She nodded, her eyes conveying her gratitude. She knew they had faced a significant threat, and she was grateful for his presence by her side. The encounter had shaken Margaret, but it had also strengthened her resolve. She knew she had to be vigilant, to trust her instincts and the lessons she had learned. The world was unpredictable, but she was not alone. She had Chayton and the twins, and together they could face anything. As they continued their journey, Margaret felt a sense of unity with Chayton. They were a team, working together to protect their family. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged in the fires of adversity. Margaret knew she could rely on Chayton, and she was determined to be a worthy partner. The forest was quiet as they walked, the tension of the encounter slowly fading. Margaret felt a sense of peace return, a belief that they were on the right path. She watched the twins play, their laughter a reminder of the hope and joy that lay ahead. As night fell, Margaret and Chayton set up camp. The fire crackled warmly, casting a comforting glow over their small circle. Margaret felt a sense of gratitude for the day's events, for the lessons learned, and the bond strengthened. Chayton kept watch, his eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of danger. Margaret felt secure knowing he was there, a steadfast guardian watching over them. She knew she could rest, trusting him completely. As she lay down to sleep, Margaret's thoughts turned to the future. The encounter with the strangers had shown her the importance of vigilance and trust. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. Margaret closed her eyes, her heart full of hope. She had learned to trust herself and the bond she shared with Chayton. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. She was ready to embrace the future, confident in their strength and unity. The morning sun broke through the trees, casting light on the path ahead. Margaret and Chayton packed their camp, preparing for another day of travel. The events of the previous day still lingered in Margaret's mind, but she felt stronger for having faced them. She was learning to trust herself and the instincts that guided her. As they set out, Margaret noticed a change in Chayton. He seemed more thoughtful, his gaze distant. She wondered what was on his mind. They walked in silence for a while, the forest around them alive with the sounds of nature. Eventually, Chayton stopped and gestured for Margaret to join him. He pointed to the horizon, where the land seemed to stretch endlessly. Margaret followed his gaze, trying to understand what he was telling her. Chayton began to speak, his words slow and deliberate. Margaret listened intently, recognizing some of the words he used. He was telling her about a community, a place where they could find support and shelter. Margaret's heart leapt at the prospect. A safe haven for her and the twins was exactly what they needed. However, as Chayton continued, Margaret felt a pang of apprehension. He was suggesting they join his people, the Lakota. Margaret knew it was a generous offer, but she also felt a twinge of fear. She had never lived among people so different from her own. The thought of integrating into a new culture was daunting. Margaret considered the options. She knew the journey would be difficult with the twins, and the forest was full of dangers. Chayton's people could offer safety and a sense of community. She weighed her fears against the needs of her children, and the choice became clear. She had to do what was best for them. Margaret nodded, signaling her agreement. She would trust Chayton and take the path he offered. She was ready to embrace the unknown for the sake of her family. Chayton smiled, a look of relief and gratitude in his eyes. He knew the decision was not easy, and he respected her courage. With their destination decided, they set off with renewed purpose. The journey was long, and the path was challenging. Margaret relied on Chayton's expertise to navigate the land. His knowledge of the terrain was invaluable, and she was grateful for his guidance. As they traveled, Margaret's mind wandered to thoughts of the Lakota community. She wondered what life would be like among them. She imagined the customs and traditions, the ways of living that were so different from her own. It was a leap into the unknown, but she was ready to face it. Chayton sensed her apprehension and offered reassurance. He gestured to himself, then to Margaret, and finally to the twins. His message was clear. They were in this together. Margaret felt a surge of gratitude for his support. She knew she could trust him to guide them. The journey was not without its challenges. The landscape was rough, and the weather unpredictable. Margaret's body ached from the constant travel, but she pushed through, driven by the promise of safety and a new beginning. Along the way, Chayton taught Margaret more about survival. He showed her how to find water and gather food, how to read the signs of the land. Margaret absorbed the lessons eagerly, knowing they were crucial for her family's survival. The twins were a constant source of joy, their laughter a reminder of what Margaret was fighting for. She watched them play, their innocence a balm to her weary soul. They were her hope, her reason for moving forward. As the days passed, Margaret felt her apprehension slowly fade. The thought of joining the Lakota no longer filled her with fear. Instead, she felt a growing sense of excitement. She was ready to embrace a new way of life, to learn and grow in ways she had never imagined. Finally, after days of travel, they reached the edge of the Lakota territory. Margaret's heart raced with anticipation and nervousness. Chayton led the way, his steps confident and sure. Margaret followed, her mind and heart open to the possibilities ahead. As they approached, the community came into view. Margaret saw people moving about, their movements purposeful and coordinated. She felt a sense of awe and respect for the community she was about to join. Chayton introduced Margaret to the elders, his words respectful and sincere. Margaret watched their faces, looking for signs of acceptance. She was nervous, but she stood tall, ready to prove herself. The elders greeted her warmly, their expressions kind and welcoming. Margaret felt a wave of relief wash over her. She knew she was a stranger in their midst, but she was determined to earn their trust and acceptance. As the day unfolded, Margaret was introduced to more members of the community. She listened intently, eager to learn about their customs and traditions. The Lakota people were generous and welcoming, their hospitality a balm to her weary spirit. Margaret felt a growing sense of belonging as she settled into the rhythm of the community. She was learning to adapt, to embrace the new life she had chosen. Her apprehensions were fading, replaced by a sense of hope and promise. Chayton was by her side, his presence a constant source of support. He helped her navigate the challenges of integration, offering guidance and encouragement. Margaret was grateful for his friendship and the bond they shared. As she lay down to sleep that night, Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. She had taken a leap of faith, and it had led her to a place of safety and belonging. She was ready to embrace the future, confident in the strength of the community and the promise of a new beginning. The days in the Lakota community began to form a new routine for Margaret. Each morning started with the warmth of the rising sun, promising a fresh start. The air was filled with the sounds of the village coming to life and the comforting hum of daily activities. Margaret had begun to settle into this new rhythm. She learned to contribute to the community, helping where she could. Her days were filled with tasks and learning, each one a step toward becoming part of this new world. The Lakota people were patient and kind, showing her the way with gentle guidance. Chayton was always nearby, ready to assist and encourage. He was a bridge between Margaret and the community, helping her understand customs and traditions. His presence was a constant source of comfort, his friendship a steady anchor in this new life. Traveling with the twins had been challenging, but the journey had strengthened Margaret. She had learned to rely on Chayton's expertise, trusting his knowledge of the land. The path had been long and hard, but she was grateful for the moments of beauty and peace they had experienced along the way. The twins adapted quickly to their new surroundings. The Lakota people embraced them with affection, and the twins thrived in the warmth of the community. Their laughter filled the air, a reminder of the hope and joy that lay ahead. Margaret marveled at the natural beauty surrounding them. The vast landscapes, the majestic wildlife, and the awe-inspiring sky became part of her daily experience. She felt a deep connection to the land, a sense of belonging that she had not expected. Each day brought new challenges and discoveries. Margaret learned to navigate the land, to find food and water, and to understand the signs of nature. Chayton's teachings were invaluable, and she absorbed each lesson with gratitude. She was becoming more confident, more capable. The journey had tested her resolve, but it had also strengthened her bond with Chayton. They had faced the elements together, relying on each other's strengths. Their shared experiences had forged a deep connection, one that Margaret cherished. As they traveled, they encountered wildlife, moments that left Margaret in awe of nature's majesty. She had seen deer grazing in the distance, their grace and beauty a reminder of the world's wonders. These encounters filled her with a sense of peace and gratitude. The journey was not without its dangers. The path was often treacherous and the weather unpredictable. But with each challenge, Margaret felt her resolve deepen. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving, learning, and growing stronger each day. The bond between Margaret and Chayton continued to grow. They communicated through gestures and simple words, their understanding of each other deepening with each shared experience. Margaret felt a sense of trust and respect for Chayton, grateful for his guidance and support. The Lakota community welcomed Margaret, offering her a sense of belonging she had not felt in a long time. She learned their ways, embracing their traditions and customs. The community became a source of strength, a place where she could build a life for her children. Margaret's heart swelled with gratitude for the new life she was creating. She had come a long way from the frightened woman left behind in the snow. She was a mother, a provider, and a part of something bigger than herself. Margaret and Chayton's bond grew stronger with each passing day. They shared stories and experiences, their connection deepening in unexpected ways. Margaret found comfort in Chayton's presence, his quiet strength a source of reassurance. As they traveled through the landscape, Margaret felt a sense of wonder at the world around her. The beauty and majesty of nature filled her with awe, a reminder of the possibilities that lay ahead. She was grateful for the journey, for the lessons learned, and the bonds formed. The future was no longer a source of fear for Margaret. She had found a new home, a place where she belonged. The Lakota community had welcomed her with open arms, offering her and the twins a sense of safety and belonging. Margaret knew there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. With Chayton by her side, she felt strong and capable. Together, they would build a future filled with hope and promise. As the sun set on another day, Margaret reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced adversity and overcome it, finding strength in herself and in the community around her. She was ready to embrace the future, confident in the path she had chosen. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a place of peace and possibility. Margaret was grateful for the experiences that had shaped her, for the people who had supported her, and for the new life she was building with Chayton and the twins. As night fell, Margaret felt a profound sense of peace. She had found her place in the world, a place where she was loved and needed. Together with Chayton and the community, she looked forward to the future, ready to embrace whatever came their way. Margaret awoke to the sounds of the Lakota community bustling with morning activity. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of pine and earth. She lay still for a moment, listening to the comforting hum of voices and laughter. The twins were still asleep, their small bodies curled against her. She smiled, feeling grateful for the warmth and security of this new world. Chayton was already outside, speaking with a few members of the community. He was respected here, his presence a reassuring sign to Margaret. She admired the way he moved through the village, his actions calm and confident. He had become a bridge between her and the Lakota, helping her understand their ways and traditions. Margaret rose quietly, careful not to wake the twins. She stepped outside, the morning sun casting a golden light over the earth. The community was alive with activity, people moving with purpose and coordination. Margaret felt a growing sense of belonging, a feeling that this was where she was meant to be. She joined the women who were preparing food, eager to learn and contribute. They welcomed her with smiles and gestures, showing her how to help. Margaret watched closely, her hands mimicking their movements. She wanted to be a part of this community, to show her gratitude by participating fully. As the day unfolded, Margaret continued to learn. She listened to the stories the elders told, absorbing the wisdom they shared. She learned about the land, the animals, and the cycles of nature. Each lesson was a gift, a way to deepen her connection to this place and its people. Chayton was never far, always ready to help and encourage her. Margaret appreciated his support, his willingness to guide her through the challenges of adapting to a new culture. She felt a deepening bond with him, a friendship that had grown into something more. The twins thrived in the community, their laughter and playfulness a joy to everyone around them. Margaret watched them with pride, grateful for the love and care they received from the Lakota. They were growing up in a world full of kindness and support, and she felt at peace knowing they were safe. As the sun moved across the sky, Margaret took a moment to reflect. She had come a long way from the days of struggle and uncertainty. The journey had been difficult, but it had led her to a place of acceptance and hope. She was building a new life, one filled with promise and possibility. The community gathered that evening for a small celebration. It was a time to come together, to share food, stories, and laughter. Margaret joined in, feeling the warmth of the people around her. She was no longer an outsider. She was part of something larger than herself. Chayton sat beside her, his presence a source of comfort. They shared a quiet moment, their connection deeper than words. Margaret felt a sense of peace, knowing she had found a place where she belonged. As the evening continued, Margaret participated in the dances and songs. She moved with the rhythm of the drums, feeling the energy and joy of the community. The experience was freeing, a way to express her gratitude and happiness. The elders spoke of the future, of the importance of unity and strength. Margaret listened, absorbing their words and feeling inspired. She knew she had a role to play in this community, a way to contribute and grow. The night sky was filled with stars as the celebration came to an end. Margaret walked back to her shelter, the twins asleep in her arms. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a belief that she was exactly where she needed to be. Chayton walked with her, his presence a comforting shadow. They spoke softly, their conversation flowing with ease. Margaret felt a connection with him that went beyond friendship, a bond forged through shared experiences and trust. As they reached her shelter, Chayton paused. Margaret met his gaze, her heart full of gratitude and affection. She knew they had faced many challenges together, and she was grateful for his unwavering support. Margaret settled the twins into bed, their small faces peaceful in sleep. She watched them for a moment, her heart swelling with love. They were her future, her reason for embracing this new life. As she lay down to sleep, Margaret thought of the journey that had brought her here. She had faced adversity and overcome it, finding strength in herself and in the community around her. She was ready to embrace the future, confident in the path she had chosen. The Lakota community had welcomed her with open arms, offering her and the twins a sense of safety and belonging. Margaret was grateful for the experiences that had shaped her, for the people who had supported her, and for the new life she was building with Chayton and the twins. As she drifted off to sleep, Margaret felt a profound sense of peace. She had found her place in the world, a place where she was loved and needed. Together with Chayton and the community, she looked forward to the future, ready to embrace whatever came their way. Margaret awoke to another day filled with promise. The Lakota community had become her home, and each morning brought new opportunities to learn and grow. She rose quietly, not wanting to disturb the twins. Their peaceful faces reminded her of the joy and purpose they brought into her life. Outside, the village was already coming to life. The air was crisp, and the light of dawn touched the earth gently. Margaret stepped out of her shelter, greeted by the familiar sounds of daily activity. She felt a sense of belonging, a connection to the people around her. Chayton was nearby, speaking with some of the men about the day's tasks. Margaret watched him, feeling a surge of gratitude for his presence in her life. He had been a guide and a friend, helping her navigate this new world with patience and kindness. Margaret spent her mornings learning from the women in the community. They taught her how to cook traditional meals, how to make clothing from animal hides, and how to care for the land. Each lesson was a gift, a way for Margaret to deepen her ties to the community. She practiced these new skills with determination, eager to contribute to the well-being of the people who had welcomed her. The women were patient and encouraging, their guidance helping Margaret feel more at home with each passing day. The twins were a constant source of joy and laughter. The community embraced them with open arms, their love and care evident in every interaction. Margaret watched them play with the other children, their laughter echoing through the village. She felt content knowing they were growing up in a world filled with love and support. As the days turned into weeks, Margaret became more comfortable with the Lakota way of life. She participated in community gatherings, learning the dances and songs that were an integral part of their culture. She felt a sense of pride in her ability to join in these traditions, to be part of something so meaningful. Chayton was always there, encouraging Margaret to embrace new experiences. Their bond continued to deepen, their friendship evolving into something more. Margaret found herself looking forward to their time together, their conversations filled with warmth and understanding. The community was preparing for a gathering, a time to celebrate the changing seasons and the bounty of the land. Margaret was excited to take part, eager to show her appreciation for the people who had become her family. She worked alongside the other women, helping to prepare food and decorations for the celebration. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation and joy, a reminder of the unity and strength that defined the community. As the day of the celebration arrived, Margaret felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She wanted to honor the traditions of the Lakota, to show her gratitude for their acceptance and support. She dressed in clothing she had made, feeling a sense of accomplishment in her ability to contribute. The celebration was a vibrant display of culture and community. The air was filled with music and laughter, the joy of the occasion evident in every face. Margaret joined in the dances, her movements guided by the rhythm of the drums. Chayton was by her side, his presence a source of confidence and comfort. They danced together, their steps in harmony with the music. Margaret felt a deep connection to him, a bond that had grown stronger with each shared experience. As the celebration continued, Margaret reflected on her journey. She had come a long way from the days of uncertainty and fear. The challenges she had faced had made her stronger, more resilient. She had found a place where she belonged, a community that embraced her and her children. Margaret felt a sense of fulfillment, a belief that she was exactly where she needed to be. She was grateful for the people who had welcomed her, for the lessons she had learned, and for the future she was building with Chayton and the twins. As the sun set, the celebration slowly came to an end. Margaret felt a sense of peace as she walked back to her shelter, the twins asleep in her arms. She was content, knowing she had found a place where she could thrive. Chayton walked with her, their conversation easy and filled with warmth. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude for his presence in her life, for the bond they shared. She knew they had a bright future ahead, filled with love and possibility. As she lay down to sleep, Margaret thought of the journey that had brought her here. She had faced adversity and overcome it, finding strength in herself and in the community around her. She was ready to embrace the future, confident in the path she had chosen. The Lakota community had become her home, a place where she was loved and needed. Margaret was grateful for the experiences that had shaped her, for the people who had supported her, and for the new life she was building with Chayton and the twins. As she drifted off to sleep, Margaret felt a profound sense of peace. She had found her place in the world, a place where she belonged. Together with Chayton and the community, she looked forward to the future, ready to embrace whatever came their way. The days turned into weeks, and Margaret's life in the Lakota community became more settled. She felt a sense of belonging and purpose, a feeling she had longed for since the journey began. The people around her had become family, and she found joy in each new day. Margaret spent her mornings helping with community tasks. She worked in the gardens, learned to weave, and participated in the many activities that kept the village thriving. Each task was a chance to learn and grow, to deepen her connection to the land and its people. Chayton was a constant presence, his support unwavering. They shared many moments, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Margaret found comfort in his companionship, a sense of partnership that filled her with hope. One afternoon, as Margaret was tending to the garden, a familiar face appeared at the edge of the village. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized a figure from her past. It was someone she had not expected to see, someone who stirred memories she had tried to put behind her. The man's presence brought a wave of emotions, a mix of surprise and unease. Margaret felt the past rushing back, memories of her life before the journey. She had moved on, but seeing him stirred something deep within her. The man approached slowly, his expression unsure. He was a settler, part of the group she had traveled with before being left behind. Margaret remembered the days of struggle and fear, the sense of abandonment that had haunted her. Chayton noticed the man's arrival and moved to stand beside Margaret. His presence was reassuring, a reminder that she was not alone. Margaret felt a surge of gratitude for Chayton's support, his quiet strength a source of comfort. The man spoke, his words hesitant. He expressed regret for the past, for the decision to leave her behind. Margaret listened, her emotions a whirlwind of confusion and understanding. She had come a long way since those days, and she was not the same person she once was. Margaret took a deep breath, her mind racing with thoughts of forgiveness and closure. She realized that holding on to the past would only weigh her down. She had a new life now, one filled with promise and possibility. With Chayton by her side, Margaret found the strength to face the man from her past. She spoke with calm and clarity, expressing her gratitude for the lessons learned and the strength she had gained. She forgave him, understanding that everyone had their struggles and challenges. The man nodded, relief and gratitude in his eyes. He wished Margaret well, acknowledging the life she had built for herself and her children. Margaret watched as he left, feeling a sense of closure and peace. The encounter had stirred old memories, but it had also strengthened Margaret's resolve. She knew she was on the right path, surrounded by people who cared for her. She had faced her past and found the courage to move forward. Chayton placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his presence a source of comfort. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude for his support, for the bond they shared. Together, they returned to the tasks of the day, the past finally at rest. As the sun set, Margaret reflected on the day's events. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a belief that she was exactly where she needed to be. The Lakota community had become her home, a place where she could thrive and grow. Margaret was grateful for the people who had welcomed her, for the lessons she had learned, and for the future she was building with Chayton and the twins. She felt at peace, knowing she had found her place in the world. The encounter with her past had been unexpected, but it had given Margaret a chance to reflect on her journey. She had come a long way, and she was proud of the person she had become. She was ready to embrace the future, confident in the path she had chosen. As night fell, Margaret felt a profound sense of peace. She had faced her past and found the strength to move forward. She was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing she had a loving community and a bright future ahead. Margaret lay down to sleep, her heart full of gratitude and hope. She had found her place in the world, a place where she was loved and needed. Together with Chayton and the community, she looked forward to the future, ready to embrace whatever came their way. The days in the community continued to pass, each one bringing Margaret closer to the life she had hoped for. The encounter with her past had given her a sense of closure, freeing her to focus on the present and the future. She was surrounded by people who cared for her, and she felt a deep sense of belonging. Chayton remained a constant presence in her life. They spent more time together, their bond deepening with each shared moment. Margaret felt a warmth in her heart whenever she saw him, a feeling that had grown beyond friendship. One afternoon, as they walked by the river, Margaret found herself thinking about Chayton in a new way. She admired his strength and kindness, the way he cared for her and the twins. She realized that her feelings for him had grown into something more, something she had not expected but welcomed with her whole heart. The thought of opening her heart again was both exciting and frightening. Margaret had loved deeply before, and the loss of her husband had been a heavy burden. But with Chaitin, she felt a sense of safety and trust. She knew he was someone she could rely on, someone who would stand by her side. Chaitin seemed to sense the change in Margaret. He was gentle and patient, giving her the space to find her own path. Their conversations were filled with warmth and understanding, a connection that transcended words. Margaret thought about the future, the possibilities that lay ahead. She imagined a life with Chaitin, a partnership built on trust and respect. The idea filled her with hope and happiness, a belief that she could find love again. The community noticed the growing bond between Margaret and Chaitin. Their acceptance and support gave Margaret the courage to embrace her feelings. She knew that love was a gift, a chance to build a new life filled with joy and promise. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Margaret and Chaitin sat together, watching the sky change colors. The moment felt right, and Margaret knew it was time to speak her heart. She turned to Chaitin, her eyes shining with emotion. She spoke softly, her words filled with honesty and vulnerability. She told him of her feelings, of the love that had grown in her heart. Chaitin listened, his expression gentle and attentive. Margaret felt a weight lift from her shoulders, her heart light with the promise of new beginnings. Chaitin took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. He spoke with sincerity, sharing his own feelings and hopes for the future. Margaret felt a rush of joy, her heart full of gratitude for the connection they shared. The decision to become partners came naturally, a mutual understanding that they were meant to walk this path together. The community celebrated their union, their joy and support a testament to the strength of their bond. Margaret felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a belief that she was exactly where she needed to be. She had found love and acceptance in the most unexpected place, and she was grateful for every moment that had led her here. The twins were delighted by the news, their laughter filling the air with joy. Margaret watched them play, her heart full of love and hope for the future. She knew that with Chaitin by her side, they could face any challenge that came their way. As the days passed, Margaret and Chaitin settled into their new life together. They worked side by side, supporting each other in all things. Their partnership was built on trust and respect, a foundation that promised a bright future. Margaret felt a sense of peace and contentment, knowing she had found her place in the world. She was grateful for the experiences that had shaped her, for the people who had supported her, and for the love she had found with Chaitin. The Lakota community had become her family, a source of strength and belonging. Margaret knew she was not alone, that she had a network of support and friendship to rely on. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life she was building, a life filled with promise and possibility. As night fell, Margaret reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced adversity and found strength in herself and in the community around her. She was ready to embrace the future, confident in the path she had chosen. Margaret lay down to sleep, her heart full of gratitude and hope. She had found her place in the world, a place where she was loved and needed. Together with Chaitin and the community, she looked forward to the future, ready to embrace whatever came their way. Life in the Lakota community continued with its comforting rhythm. The days were filled with work, laughter, and shared moments. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life she had built with Chaitin, the twins, and the community. Each day brought new opportunities to learn and grow, and she embraced them with an open heart. The community was preparing for an important celebration. It was a time to honor milestones and traditions, a gathering that brought everyone together. The air buzzed with excitement as people worked to prepare for the festivities. Margaret was eager to participate, to show her appreciation for the community that had become her family. She joined the women in preparing food, her hands busy with the familiar tasks. They laughed and chatted, sharing stories and wisdom. Margaret felt a deep connection to these women, their friendship a source of strength and joy. Chaitin was also busy, helping with the preparations. He moved with purpose, his actions smooth and efficient. Margaret watched him with admiration, grateful for his leadership and support. Together, they had created a life filled with love and promise. The twins were excited about the upcoming celebration. Their laughter echoed through the village as they played with the other children. Margaret watched them with pride, knowing they were growing up in a world filled with kindness and support. As the day of the celebration arrived, the community gathered in the central clearing. The air was filled with the scent of cooking food and the sound of music. People dressed in their best clothes, their faces alight with joy. Margaret felt a sense of excitement as she joined the festivities. She was proud to be part of this community, to celebrate the traditions that bound them together. The atmosphere was one of unity and joy, a reminder of the strength and resilience that defined the Lakota people. The celebration began with a series of dances, each one telling a story of the past and honoring the cycles of nature. Margaret joined in, her movements guided by the rhythm of the drums. She felt a deep connection to the earth and its people, a sense of belonging that filled her with peace. Chayton danced beside her, their movements in harmony. Margaret felt a surge of love and gratitude for him, for the life they were building together. She knew they had a bright future ahead, filled with love and possibility. The elders spoke, sharing stories and wisdom that had been passed down through generations. Margaret listened intently, absorbing the lessons and insights. She felt honored to be part of this gathering, to learn from those who had come before her. As the sun set, the community gathered around the fire. The flames danced in the evening air, casting a warm glow over the gathering. People shared food and stories, their laughter mingling with the crackling of the fire. Margaret felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she sat with Chayton and the twins. She had found her place in the world, a place where she was loved and needed. She was grateful for the people who had supported her, for the lessons she had learned, and for the future she was building. The celebration continued late into the night, the air filled with music and laughter. Margaret felt a sense of peace as she watched the community come together. She knew she was exactly where she needed to be, surrounded by people who cared for her. As the night wore on, Margaret reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced adversity and overcome it, finding strength in herself and in the community around her. She was ready to embrace the future, confident in the path she had chosen. The Lakota community had become her family, a source of strength and belonging. Margaret knew she was not alone, that she had a network of support and friendship to rely on. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life she was building, a life filled with promise and possibility. As the celebration came to an end, Margaret felt a profound sense of peace. She had found her place in the world, a place where she was loved and needed. Together with Chayton and the community, she looked forward to the future, ready to embrace whatever came their way. Margaret lay down to sleep, her heart full of gratitude and hope. She had found her place in the world, a place where she belonged. Together with Chayton and the community, she looked forward to the future, confident in the strength of their bond and the promise of a new beginning. The sun rose gently over the Lakota community, marking the start of a new day. Margaret awoke to the soft sounds of the village stirring to life. She felt a sense of peace as she lay there, the twins still curled up beside her. Their steady breathing was a comforting reminder of the life she had built for them. Margaret rose quietly, careful not to wake the twins. She stepped outside, greeted by the fresh morning air and the sight of her neighbors beginning their daily tasks. The village was alive with activity, each person contributing to the well-being of the community. Chayton was already up, speaking with a group of men about the day's plans. Margaret watched him, feeling a surge of gratitude for his presence in her life. He had been a steadfast partner, helping her navigate the challenges and joys of their journey together. The community was preparing for a new season, a time of change and renewal. Margaret felt the energy of the village, a collective excitement for the future. She was eager to participate, to contribute to the community that had embraced her and her family. As the day unfolded, Margaret joined the women in preparing for the changing season. They worked together, sharing stories and laughter as they tended to the gardens and gathered supplies. Margaret felt a deep connection to these women, their friendship a source of strength and joy. The twins played nearby, their laughter a constant background to the day's work. Margaret watched them with pride, grateful for the love and care they received from the community. They were growing up in a world filled with kindness and support, and she felt at peace knowing they were safe. Margaret spent the afternoon with Chayton, discussing plans for the future. They talked about their dreams and aspirations, the life they wanted to build together. Margaret felt a sense of excitement as they imagined the possibilities, their vision for the future filled with hope and promise. Chayton spoke of teaching the twins the skills they would need to thrive in the community. Margaret agreed, eager for them to learn and grow in the ways of the Lakota people. She knew they would benefit from the wisdom and traditions that had been passed down through generations. As the sun began to set, the village gathered to celebrate the turning of the season. It was a time to reflect on the past and look forward to the future, a moment of unity and gratitude. Margaret felt a sense of fulfillment as she joined the gathering, surrounded by people who had become her family. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, a reminder of the cycles of nature and the strength of the community. Margaret participated with a full heart, her gratitude for the life she had found evident in every action. She was proud to be part of something so special, to contribute to the well-being of the people around her. Chayton stood beside her, his presence a source of comfort and joy. Margaret felt a deep connection to him, a bond that had grown stronger with each shared experience. She knew they had a bright future ahead, filled with love and possibility. As the ceremony came to an end, Margaret reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced adversity and overcome it, finding strength in herself and in the community around her. She was ready to embrace the future, confident in the path she had chosen. The Lakota community had become her home, a place of safety and belonging. Margaret knew she was not alone, that she had a network of support and friendship to rely on. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life she was building, a life filled with promise and possibility. As night fell, Margaret felt a profound sense of peace. She had found her place in the world, a place where she was loved and needed. Together with Chayton and the community, she looked forward to the future, ready to embrace whatever came their way. Margaret lay down to sleep, her heart full of gratitude and hope. She had found her place in the world, a place where she belonged. Together with Chayton and the community, she looked forward to the future, confident in the strength of their bond and the promise of a new beginning. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.